How many goblins could a goblin gob if a goblin could gob goblins?
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is a Jersey Boy special, with Ryan playing Bladewing. He keeps Desert of the Glorified, Swamp, Smoldering Marsh, Ogre Battle Driver, Dance of the Dead, Tormenting Voice, and Dragon Tempest. Harry is playing Garna, keeping Command Tower, Entomb, Thought Vessel, Swamp, Bloodstained Mire, Gamble, and Luxury Suite. Mike is rocking the Brudiclad deck, keeping a Cascade Bluffs, 2 Mountains, an Island, Trading Post, Reality Scramble, and Hordling Outburst. And last but not least, Trevor is playing Elesh Norn, keeping an Everflowing Chalice, 3 Plains, Blighted Steppe, Wingmate Rock, and Brimaz. Harry wins the die roll and starts us off. Harry plays a Luxury Suite and casts that turn 1 Gamble. He goes to find a card and discards Bloodstained Mire as a result. Trevor plays a Plains. Ryan plays a tap Smoldering Marsh. Mike plays a Cascade Bluffs and passes back to Harry. Harry plays a Command Tower and pays 2 mana for a Thought Vessel. Trevor plays another Plains and kicks his Everflowing Chalice once, which comes in with 1 counter. Ryan plays a Swamp and 2 mana gets him a Dragon Tempest. Mike draws and plays a Mountain, passing. Harry draws and plays out a Swamp. He casts an Unstable Obelisk and then an Altar of Dementia before passing to Trevor. Trevor plays a Plains and casts Conqueror's Galleon, passing turn. Ryan drops a tapped Desert of the Glorified and casts Tormenting Voice. He pitches Balefire Dragon to the spell and draws 2. Mike plays an Island and brings out the Goblins. The Hordling Outburst makes him 3 1/1s, and he passes as he goes to grab his tokens. Harry plays a Tainted Peak as his land for turn, and just passes. Trevor plays a Blighted Steppe and casts Brimaz. Ryan plays a tap Baron Moor for his land for turn, and pays 2 mana for Animate Dead. He targets the Balefire Dragon in his graveyard, bringing it back. This gives him a Dragon Tempest trigger, and he deals 1 to one of Mike's Goblin tokens as it enters. He then goes to combat, as the Balefire Dragon is released from the Dragon Tempest, and he hits Trevor for 5. This triggers the Balefire Dragon when it connects, dealing 5 to all of Trevor's creatures, and Ryan then passes. Mike plays a Mountain and casts Reality Scramble. He targets one of his tokens and only has to go 1 card deep to polymorph into a Stormtide Leviathan. Mike then passes, and at the end of turn, Harry flashes out Garna. With his commander on the stack, Harry then responds to his own spell by casting Entomb. He tutors for a Shriekmaw, putting it to his graveyard. Garna then enters, and with her Enter the Battlefield trigger on the stack, Harry sacrifices her to the Altar of Dementia to mill himself for 3. He then lets her trigger resolve, and puts to hand Garna, the Shriekmaw, and the newly milled Sidisi Undead Vizier. Harry plays a Shadowblood Ridge, and evokes a Shriekmaw. It enters, and targets the Balefire Dragon. Before resolving the Evoke or Destroy trigger, Harry sacrifices the Elemental to the altar to mill himself for 3 again. He then brings out Garna once more, sacrificing her once her Enter the Battlefield ability hits the stack again, and mills himself for 3 more. He then resolves her Enter the Battlefield trigger, and this time Harry returns Sir Conrad, Garna, the new Chainer, and Shriekmaw to hand. He then passes with 7 cards in hand. Trevor plays a Plains and passes. Ryan pays 2 for Dance of the Dead in his main phase, bringing back the Balefire Dragon again, which comes in tapped. It still triggers the Tempest though, dealing 1 to Mike's Goblin.
Trigger 1. Okay, Shriek.
He then passes. Mike plays a Sulphur Falls and casts a Wayfarer's Bauble. Moving to combat, the Stormtide Leviathan goes at Ryan and connects for 8. Harry draws and casts a Rakdos Cluestone, passing. Trevor draws and plays an Arcane Lighthouse. He then has enough mana as he taps out for Elesh Norn.
Green, because they're playing around.
She's here.
She's here.
And passes. Ryan pays the 2 on his upkeep to untap his Balefire Dragon with the Dance of the Dead trigger, and he plays a Snow-Covered Mountain and goes to combat. He swings at Mike for 5, dealing 5 to Mike's creatures, but the Stormtide is beefy enough to take the hit. Ryan then passes, and at the end of turn, Mike sacrifices the Bauble to find a basic. He puts to field a tapped island and shuffles up before starting his turn. Mike draws and plays a mountain. He taps enough for his commander, bringing out Brudiclad and moving to combat. Brudiclad makes a token mirror, and Mike has it become nothing because it dies to Elesh Norn immediately. Mike then hits Ryan with the Leviathan again for 6 and passes. At the end of turn, Harry flashes in Garna, doing his little trick of sacrificing her before the Enter the Battlefield trigger goes off. He unfortunately only gets to mill himself for 1 this time because of Elesh Norn's static -2/-2. Harry's turn has him casting Sidisi Undead Vizier, and she enters, and Harry has her exploit herself to tutor for a card. Harry then moves to discard and passes. Trevor draws and plays a Howling Mine in his main phase before passing turn. Ryan pays the 2 to untap his dragon from the dance trigger, and then draws 2 for turn. We then see Shenanigans get cast, and target Harry's altar, which gets destroyed. Mike then gets hit for 5 again with the dragon, who then deals 5 to all of Mike's creatures. Ryan then moves to his post-combat main phase, paying 1 red to take out the Stormtide with a Flame Slash, and he passes to Mike. Mike draws his cards and moves to his main phase. He plays an island for turn and casts Mind Moil, passing to Harry. Harry draws his 2 for turn and pays 2 for Rakdos Signet. He casts a Solemn Simulacrum, who enters and immediately dies. This has Harry drawing a card before having him go and find a basic for the field, and he then pays 1 black mana for Phyrexian Reclamation, passing to Trevor. Trevor draws his 2 and taps Elesh Norn to crew the Galleon. He swings it at Ryan, dealing 4. At the end of combat, it transforms into a Conqueror's Foothold. 5 mana in his post-combat main phase gets Trevor a Ringmate Rock. It comes in and knows Trevor attacked, fulfilling the raid clause and making Trevor a 3/4 bird token. Ryan thinks about his upkeep trigger, leaving the Balefire tapped, and draws his 2. He's a bit behind on lands at this point, which is saying something considering Trevor is playing mono white, and Ryan taps enough to cast Crux of Fate to destroy all non-dragons. Mike has nothing, Harry has no response, but Trevor responds once he gains priority by casting an Unbreakable Formation. This has basically nothing get destroyed, and Ryan then passes. Mike draws his 2 and plays a mountain. He pays enough for a Windreader Sphinx, which as it hits the stack, triggers his Mind Moil. Mike then bottoms his hand and draws that many new cards, and the Sphinx then resolves, and he passes. Harry draws 2 and plays a tap for Boding Ruins in his main phase, realizing he should have used the Reclamation at the end of Mike's turn. He activates it in his main phase, losing 2 life and paying the 2 mana to return his Solemn back to hand. 4 mana then gets him the Solemn again, drawing him a card first and then finding a basic for the field tapped. Harry then pays 2 more mana for Arcane Signet and passes. Trevor draws and plays a Plains. He doesn't know who to attack, but he first plays out a Monastery Mentor. Moving to combat, Elesh Norn heads at Ryan, while the Wingmate and Bird go at Mike. The Windreader Sphinx sees the 2 flyers attacking, and Mike gets to draw 2 cards, while Trevor gains 3 life because of the Wingmate seeing them attacking. Ryan then takes the hit, and Mike blocks one of the flyers, taking 5 in the air. In Trevor's post-combat main phase, Return to Dusk gets cast and targets the Tempest and the Reclamation. This gains him a Monk token from the Mentor, and Harry activates the Reclamation before it's resolved and returns Sidisi to hand, losing 2 life. Ryan pays to untap the Balefire and draws his 2. He's really struggling with those lands at this point, and he doesn't want to incur the wrath of Trevor by swinging the Balefire at him, and he simply passes to Mike as he discards down to 7. Mike plays an island for turn, and casts Rhystic Study. He resolves the Mind Moil trigger, bottoming his hand, and then drawing that many before he passes. Harry draws 2 and plays a Cavern of Souls, naming Human. 4 mana is then tapped for Sneak Attack, and Mike draws 1 from Harry, not paying the study tax. Harry then pays 1 red to bring in Massacre Girl, but she doesn't actually massacre anything at this point. Harry then sneak attacks in a Shriekmaw, which dies immediately to Elesh Norn's static ability, but Harry still gets the Enter the Battlefield trigger. He has to destroy Elesh Norn, which between its own death and now Trevor's creatures being smaller, basically has the Massacre Girl popping off like she would normally. Harry then sneak attacks in Sidisi, exploiting herself as she enters, and goes to tutor for a card. And Harry then casts a Phyrexian Altar, paying the study tax. At this point, the guys know it's pretty much game, since they know how Harry's deck works, and with no counters for the altar, Harry then brings out a Grey Merchant once it resolves using Sneak Attack. He drains his opponents for 4, and then sacrifices the zombie to the altar for 1 red. He uses that red to bring in Garna, and responding to their Enter the Battlefield trigger, Harry sacrifices her to the altar for 1 red, and returns all creatures to his hand that had been put into the graveyard this turn. He's then able to loop through this over and over again, until he's able to win the game, and the guys concede to Harry. Game review time. So unfortunately for the guys, they fell for the classic blunder of not killing Harry first, which, when you're playing with Harry, is kind of rule number 1. Harry's deck, especially Garna, walks the fine line between being good and disruptive, and just going off, and as you saw, that last turn, he only needed a few cards to really start popping off. I think Mike's Brudiclad deck definitely did some interesting things, and I think that he probably should have been reusing the Reality Scramble a little bit more with the Retrace. It would have dug him into some better answers, I think, but I say this realizing fully well that Elesh Norn will shut off Brudiclad's mirror tokens, and I think that's what he was hoping to use the Reality Scramble on. Ryan unfortunately seemed to be stuck on lands, which is not where you want to be when you have a bunch of dragons, even if they are coming back from your graveyard for a reduced cost. It seemed like on average he was only able to cast about 1 spell per turn, which especially late game is not where you want to be. Trevor's Elesh Norn deck still shows how powerful it can be, but it also highlights how bad mono white is at interacting. Outside of using the Unbreakable formation, Trevor couldn't really handle any of Harry's interaction at instant speed. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.